Well, it's a funny thing in this business. It seems that every day it's easy to go, man, it just keeps getting crazier. Every day more news comes, and every day the cycle gets more full, and every day, and it becomes this kind of like constant statement where you say it's just a lot of news to talk about today. But what's interesting is that it does genuinely feel like things are becoming more intense. The fever pitch is rising. The information cycle is getting ridiculous. Even if it was, how it could get more ridiculous is beyond me. But I decided to invite Charlie Robinson on to have a conversation about the independent media and some new moves that he's made around that, but also just to catch up with him and discuss how wild things are today. And I'm sure you guys are paying attention with some of the recent moves that are going on in foreign policy that we'll talk about, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. So Charlie, thanks for joining me, brother. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss these days. And I agree with you. It seems like, I remember years where there wasn't really much going on. It felt like there wasn't a huge story. And now it's every other day. There's something crazier than the last time around. And it feels a bit destabilizing, almost overwhelming. So I think it's probably incumbent on us to stay measured and remain calm and take in all the information to the extent that we can and see where things go. But I agree with you. It feels like the intensity level has been ramped up.
Yeah. So do you think that, I think it's always, we could probably both argue that it's always some level of deliberate action, but just on that first idea, do you sense this is something that's sort of just like a, evolving kind of chaos because everyone's, or do you feel this is deliberately being ramped up for something? We can get into that too in the discussion, but.
Well, there's bound to be chaos when you have a changeover in administrations, especially when you go from one like the Bidens, who they were, who knows really who was in charge of that. And that we're sort of just starting to get a handle on some of the criminality that was going on behind the scenes. And then Trump coming in, and Trump's always a bull in the china shop. So you should expect the unexpected with him as well. When you take the two of them, I think the contrast is so stark because there were times when you just looked at the administration of Biden-Harris and you thought, are they doing anything? What are they doing? I know they're trying to destroy the soul of the country by, turning everybody into drag queens and incentivizing some bizarre behavior. But besides that, what are they doing? It felt like for the last 6 months or so, they were just running out the clock, trying to maybe get out of there. And then when Trump comes in, he's like, it kind of reminded me of when Obama came in. When Obama came in, it was like the reports were on day one that his team, as soon as he took his hand off the Quran or whatever he swore allegiance to, his team was sprinting into the White House to get things going and start that process. And I felt that again, obviously, I think everybody did with the Trump administration. Now, like him or hate him or, have problems with what they're doing, it's undeniable that they're doing something. And it feels like they're sprinting into this. And I think for some segment of the population, they're okay with that because at least they feel like something's getting done. Now, once you peel it back, there's problems with a lot of the things that are getting done, but it's undeniable that there's a lot of action taking place. And I think people were sort of waiting for someone to come in and actually do something. It's like, you're the president of the United States. Aren't you supposed to be issuing orders and getting in front of the camera and telling everybody what's going on? Joe Biden was afraid of the camera. From before while he was running, he campaigned in his basement, and then when he became president, everybody was, he was bubble wrapped, and everyone was scared to put him on that stage for fear that couldn't get off of it, or he'd fall down, or he'd say something ridiculous, or he'd talk about ice cream. And so there was that very uncomfortable feeling like, okay, the less in front of the public, the better with this guy. Right. And with Trump, he's out in the public. He's being Trump. Yeah, exactly. So I think that in some regards, people are probably viewing that as a positive, that at least things are getting done. And you start to see like, hey, he's doing something to USAID. Okay, good. Yeah. National Endowment for Democracy next, please take them down as well, right? Or what is it? And then you peel back and you go, well, is he destroying them, or is he putting them under the State Department so that he has control over them now? What exactly is happening? So I think that depending on where you are in your understanding of how this government actually works. I think that dictates sort of how you're feeling about the first couple of weeks, but it's undeniable that there's been enthusiasm injected into it. If for no other reason, for the business side of things, if you're you're somebody who's let's just say you're a small to medium sized business, you have to extrapolate out and make plans a couple years out and figure, am I going to hire? Am I going to invest in this? Am I going to take on? Am I going to start am I going to do a new office somewhere? Am I going to expand? Am I going to contract? With the Biden administration, everybody felt tense. Nobody really knew what would happen. I can't really plan for the future because they may send OSHA in here to mandate some new crazy law. And now I've got to reconfigure my entire restaurant. And I've got to build an indoor version outside with tents. And I've got to spend all the money on that. I've got to make the outside look like the inside because the inside's covered with COVID and we're all going to die. So I made the inside actually outside yeah, oh God, so if you're somebody who's running a business, just knowing that the next couple of years, there's at least a little bit more clarity on regulations and where things are going, and
or lack thereof.
Yeah, or lack thereof. Right. So you can plan accordingly. And I think from a business standpoint, that community is seeing this as a positive.
Yeah, and I'm really I like the way you laid all that out right there. There's a lot to get into. And I think what's interesting though, and you tell me what you think about this, because I can't stop seeing this everywhere. And I'm of course trying to check, make sure I'm not just trying to, I think this is very transparent that there's ways that they're, setting us up to using things we want to believe in order to usher in something worse, kind of a dynamic, right? But what's interesting though is like the action part, right? I mean, this is what I mean. It's like this doesn't have to mean this was deliberate. It could just be the way it actually just worked out. But if you look at the way these things function, you got Biden, who, again, at the time, before Trump, it's kind of like this guy it's ridiculous. Like clearly he's, the whole weekend at Bernie's joke. It was like that was before he even was elected. It's like it's clear that we all see this. And so you put this person in there that's just inept, and then like you say, now I think we can all we can look at things, and whether it's good or bad, action does not mean positive. It just means action. It could be bad. But in Biden's situation, you're right. It seemed to be like you didn't see a lot. That doesn't mean there wasn't stuff happening, but I agree with your basic sentiment that was ultimately, what was really happening. But is that because ultimately this was the way this was supposed to play, right? To where now we get the Trump rushing in with executive orders instead of actually doing what we would expect, claiming all, criticizing executive orders and everybody else, then coming into this just roughshod right over everything, And so, but that's my thing, is that if that happened after somebody else that was more measured, that even Republicans might go, whoa, but now it's like, well, good. That's the contrast. And so it's like rationalizing the thing we would otherwise go, wait a minute, shouldn't we do this the right way? And the same thing is that I would argue, rather than the same thing, but to your other point, I would argue that in the context of businesses, I see a mixed bag, actually. I get what you're saying, and I think that my opinion is that's coming from the opinion that Trump is going to do right, whatever they see him doing. I get the sense of a lot of people that even Republicans are going like, whoa, what is happening right now? Way more than with Biden, in a different way. Like, because there's a lot of rugs being pulled and things shifting and companies and agencies go, the point is right now, I don't think you can plan at all with what's happening, even if you think what he's doing is in good interests. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of shifting ground right now.
I'm talking about I'm not saying if you work in some capacity where you interact with the government so much. I'm talking about if you're a businessman who owns a lumber store in Des Moines, Iowa, you're just feeling like, okay, I feel like a little bit of sanity has been injected back into this. I don't worry that he's going to come in and weaponize these departments to make me have to reimagine my entire business. And
but see, this is about the woke politics overlap, right? Which is, I think, is another huge element of this, is that ultimately we have been set up to think that woke politics is the end all be all of the New World Order or the end, which is just, I think, a very minor aspect of a means to an end to what they're really trying to accomplish. And so if it's only about like pronouns and whatever else we're talking about from that kind of Biden Democrat perspective of what they're trying to do, which I tend to think is just our government from a different flavor, that ultimately that makes it easy for them to think that whatever now is happening, it's better, because that's not there. Except I keep seeing a lot of uncertain people because of even Trump supporters, they're just like, they don't really know what this will end up being, because they're, Elon's talking about all regulations and all, which ultimately, in my opinion, is if government is still the way it is and you remove regulation, that's not what we think it is, right? Government should be gone, in my opinion, and then that would be good. But if you have the government structure we have and they remove regulations, all that's going to mean is dumping stuff in your water, getting away with whatever they want. That's how I would read that, And
hopefully that's not the case of what's going on. But
I agree.
But we always have to be careful to
Yes.
that we're not walking into a trap, right? It's like, oh, we got rid of the weekend at Bernie's guy. Now we got a guy who actually gets things done. The question is, what is he going to get done?
Exactly.
If he's really good at it. And of course that he'll do this to the enthusiastic support of his base. The people on the right will cheer this stuff. Whereas if it were, if he had a Biden mask on, they'd be apoplectic about it. I mean, the executive orders and whatnot. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical about these things. But
let's focus on that point right there real quick, though. The idea of the executive order, like the idea that if there's a group of people out there that would rage if it happened with a D next to someone's name, but argue it's a positive thing with an R next to the name, that to me is hypocrisy. Blatantly, right? And I think that's important, because I think that's literally everywhere in the conversation, which makes me very uncomfortable, because
as I hold up my book, Hypocrisy.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
As I hold up my book, Hypocrisy.
Right.
Second edition is just out. I was just thinking, it's hypocrisy is like baked into the equation, right? I mean, it's when one side does it, it's a problem. When the other side does it, it's somehow fine. And that's the problem of if you really want to get things done that are detrimental to the Republicans, get a Republican in there to sell it to the rest of the base. You'll get him in there, and there won't be the sort of scrutiny that you would hope would happen from the general public towards any of these. If it's an executive order, that means that it's just by decree. And exactly. that's a huge problem. I mean, I thought we wanted to get away from governments being able to just decree this. The problem is that these people will rationalize that by saying, yeah, but it's a good thing that he's doing.
Right.
And it's like, it doesn't necessarily matter that it's a good thing that he's doing. It's the method in which he's doing it is inherently bad. But
this is interesting, though. This is interesting. And see, it's funny. I love these kind of just planned shows, like where we don't have, because we go into a conversation. I want to talk about activist post and the rest of this work, but we're already jumping right into it. But so this is really important, though. The idea that we can see the way, I mean, I almost just lost the thread there. Hold on. So basically, just say what you just said again.
Well, that when you're using executive orders, when your guy is using executive orders.
Oh, okay. I got it again.
It's thunderous applause. Yeah. When your enemy is doing it, it's somehow, oh my God, this is a catastrophe. But it's like, no, in actuality, that whole method of doing that is gross and has no part here. The only thing that it's getting support, because the things that he's ordering are the things that really should have been in the first place and shouldn't have had to, you shouldn't have to do this. And the fact that he's doing it is viewed as a positive, but it's like, it'd be better if we could do it a different way. And then it would feel a little bit more organic and less dictatorish. And of course, you clap when he's making moves to secure the border, without understanding the bigger picture of, once he secures the border, then we've got problems with, how is he going to keep everybody from coming back? Is it biometrics? Is he scanning eyeballs and things like that? So you feel like, be careful, because we might be problem reaction solutioning ourselves into a much bigger play that the general public hasn't really thought of yet.
I think that's the whole conversation, in my opinion. But I think the evidence is very clear that, the steps are going that direction. What I was going to say before is, and this is an interesting conversation, because I'm very concerned with all of this, but if you stand back and take away all the partisanship from it, Biden, Trump, remove it all, and we're just looking at just like an apolitical dynamic, that's even possible, we all can acknowledge that the system is so just crazy broken, right? It's set up to fail in order. So they basically rationalize the same problem every time, right? Because I get it. Well, Democrats are going to not let him do whatever he wants to do. That's probably true, right? So ultimately the executive order becomes the necessity, because they have to do that to get beyond the problem, and it never really goes away. It just kind of cycles around. So, but outside of the partisan side, I think we all agree that there is a broken dynamic. And let's just say somebody did actually want to do a good thing for a long-term positive change to get away from the situation, you could argue why you understand that logic, right? Because otherwise it's not going to happen. And so this is, we've been set up in this moment for a very long time, in my opinion. And so I'd like to believe, and I'm still hoping that Donald Trump and the rest of what they're doing will be what they believe it is. I think everything right now is showing the opposite, but I'm still hoping that. My point, though, is that it's so easy to see how that works, to where he's going to come in and let's just take the USAID point, right? Right, executive order, which, by the way, legally speaking, only applies to executive branch. So I don't know why we think like these things make sense foreign policy wise and everything else, but it ultimately strikes that down. So people like us are like, yeah, that's a regime change front. We've been calling this out for a very long time, right? That's fantastic. But then it ultimately becomes very quietly. Most of the base doesn't even talk. They talk about it online. You're getting pushback saying, no, it's gone now, which, you know, rightly has just simply been absorbed into the State Department, which technically was already kind of what it was, to be honest. And so now, and then you got Rubio saying, now I'm taking control. And even though today we see them getting rid of, you know, all the employees and all these different moves, we just don't know what the outcome will be. And it seems to me that it only ends up being the same problem in a very more centralized way, like with Elon, the Treasury, and all these different moves. And so it's like, I would get why we would like to see somebody break it all and do it in a better way. But like you said, going about it in this unilateral way it's just corruption in a different flavor. You know what I mean? Like, but even if you do the right thing in the outcome. And so I guess it just is this very dangerous path we're on, where people are cheering what I see as their own subjugation because they're tearing down parts of what we see, like the Fed for a private tether CBDC dynamic. You know what I mean? Right. And so I'm just super on guard for that. And so, but I think that conversation is worth having. You know, what would we do if we were in a position where somebody really wanted positive change and they were never going to let it happen? It's like revolution, war, this action, you know, I honestly don't know. So it's difficult even for me, knowing my opinion is I don't trust this, but the logic is there, you know?
I don't trust any of it either. And when they do something that on the surface seems like it's a benefit to us, you always have to keep your eye on the other hand that the magician has behind his back. You know, what is he really doing? Are you being set up for something else? And that is, I think that comes with experience, with doing this and watching how governments operate and seeing the tactics that they use. You know, any good propaganda is about 90% truth, you know? I mean, so they're going to tell you the things that you want to hear and you're going to nod in agreement with it. And it might all sound good and it might be exactly what you want, but it could be just that small little bit that you didn't calculate. You know, great, USAID getting dismantled. That sounds amazing. That should have happened a while ago. But then you have to ask for where's the okie doke here? Is it, well, it's going to be moved in the State Department. Okay, so is it going away for real, or is it getting a new boss? And if the new boss is Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio has the same sort of ideology as all these other lunatics, then what are we doing? Really? I mean, is it really getting changed? I mean, I like the idea, and certainly it's good for the optics to see all these deep state scumbags scrambling to try and find out where their money is going. And you hear Hillary Clinton talking about this, and Chuck Schumer's talking about an unelected coup, and the audacity, you know, of all of this. And so all the right people are freaked out about this, and you go, yay, this is great, because you want to see those people feeling uncomfortable. But you always have to kind of look and wait and see how it gets played. You know, once the headlines, you know, it's out of the headlines and it's sort of, you know, we're in the process where the media cycle's moved on to something else. Well, what is USAID doing? Let's say the second half of this year. Are they still, I mean, does it just shift away from Ukraine, and we're not going to be involved in the Ukraine situation anymore because that's terrible? Meanwhile, they're just setting up shop in Israel, you know.
Well, they're also funding Ukraine still. Trump just rerouted, of course, weapons from Israel to Poland is going to Ukraine, and Israel's continued to fund Ukraine anyway. And if they fund Israel, so you know, it's all a shell game at the end of the day. That's important though for people to hear. They don't know that the funding to Ukraine and weaponry has already continued, and so at the $1 billion package that's about to go to Israel, you know, and so it's like these continuation of it. But I agree completely, you know. But what you said there is interesting though, you know, and this is the same kind of question. So the Schumers, for example. I mean, it's almost too perfect to watch this like weird back and forth between Elon and Schumer, or like in Congress we just saw where they're like, Elon's framing it as, you know, the deep state Democrats, or like it's only one half the paradigm, are freaked out and whining because we're, you know, exposing their crimes. And it's just like, I mean, anyone that would actually step back and think that even USAID or any of these is only one part of the paradigm, I mean, that's fun. You could objectively prove that's not true, going right through Trump's last administration. So it's just so shallow and hollow, you know. But so my point would be that so Schumer is saying these things, and so over a lot of them, right? And what's interesting is I think Schumer is an obvious criminal. You should just dishonest person, like all of them, in my opinion, but definitely Schumer. Yeah. But he's saying things that you go, well, outside of a few of the different partisan sides of what he's saying, it's technically accurate, right? I mean, what he's saying is very clear. But you go, that's interesting. Like Catherine Austin Fitts made the same point. She's like, first time in my life I ever agree with Chuck Schumer.
I saw that.
Which is funny, right? And so my question is, do you think that Schumer is actually pushing back on this, which would highlight for me what Whitney highlights? You know, the kind of the changing of the guard, like the old neocon, neoliberal, technocratic. They're kind of both want to control your lives and will work together for that end, but want to do it themselves. You know, like that kind of fighting versus maybe it's all a show. I'm kind of leaning that way at this point, like the way it's all being shown. But what do you think?
At its core, it's all pro wrestling.
Yeah,
on some levels, and you know how Hulk Hogan becomes the heel all of a sudden, right? Now we've got a new narrative. Now we've got brand new storylines that'll keep us going for the next couple of years. And now the Democrats are gonna, they're gonna stand up and they're gonna fight back against this authoritarian regime of Donald Trump and everything. And you go, oh, it feels like a show. I think Chuck Schumer legitimately is upset about this. I think I think there's a grift going on that has always been sort of underneath the surface. These guys that, obviously we see the Nancy Pelosi's of the world come in broke and leave with $100 million in their account now, whether that's insider trading or money in the Cayman Islands or a little of both, or money that Zelensky's saying, well, we're supposed to get 177 billion and we can only count for 70 something. Where's the rest of that money? Well,
sure, we trust him at face value because that makes sense, right?
Of course, yeah. Not like he didn't squirrel a bunch of it away as well. But we know that there's a skim going on, and anytime you go in there and disrupt what's been happening for the last couple of years, I can very easily envision a scenario in which the Chuck Schumers of the world are legitimately angry because it is messing up their grift. Now, maybe that money's getting rerouted to somebody else, and now for the next 4 years, that person is going to be benefiting from it. And when the new administration comes in, if it's Democrat and they make some changes, then that person will be incensed about it because now all of a sudden his grift has gone away. But I mean, I think the common denominator here is that if you put yourself in a position to be in Congress for multiple decades, you are a criminal on some level, whether we know it or haven't figured it out yet. But the job by design precludes good people from getting involved in actually fixing the system. And anytime, somebody comes up, wants to blow the whistle on any of this, they fund his opposition, and next thing you know, he's out. Like what's his name? Madison Cawthorn wants to talk about the part, stay for the for the nighttime parties, the late night after parties and everything. Next thing you know, he's gone. Right. So if you play ball, meaning you're a criminal, and I think that Washington, D.C. at its core attracts the worst types of personality types in there. If you've got a place that will give you everything that a sociopath would want, maybe it's money, it's power, it's sex, it's access, it's women, it's children, whatever it is that floats your boat, they're going to know where your control points are, and they're going to give you exactly what they want, what you want, in order to get you in a situation where they own you. And after a while, these people are all at the same parties. They're owned. It reminds me of the part in Whitney's in the first book of One Nation Under Blackmail, where they're talking about the parties that J. Edgar Hoover would go to at the plaza that were set up by Roy Cohn. And like Hoover shows up in drag to everybody at the party. Everybody in the party knows it's him, right? He shows up in drag. And the thought process behind that is it's mutually assured destruction. You know what I mean? I got the goods on you. You got the goods on me. What are we going to do? Let's party. We're all part of this club. And so understanding that, I think, makes you kind of understand that, sure, Chuck Schumer is still and has always been a criminal operating there. And part of what he's doing, I'm sure, is theater. But I also think that he's probably recognizing that one of his lines of resources has been shut off by a guy who had the ability to do it in Trump. And I think that some people that are watching it, the casual political observers that don't like the Democratic Party, probably see that and they go, oh, this is fantastic. Whatever makes Chuck Schumer angry is something that I will support, regardless of whether it's unconstitutional or whether it's bad for the country eventually. As long as I see the guys that I hate get what they have coming to them, the ends justify the means. And that, of course, is a huge problem.
It is, and it's a partisan thing. It's left and right, and it's, in my opinion, it's just pretty much anybody that's in, there's a divide, but I would say more the team sport politics side of it, but it's largely a partisan thing to just, it's rah, my team, and we just see it's more than ever today, and it's frustrating, and I get why they want that. They've been driven into that position, but this is the problem. It's like the thing I was saying with the woke politics. It's, you get these major influencers that make every little thing about, as long as they call out the woke, the pronouns and the DEI, that nothing else really matters, or how they do it. Or in the other same kind of point, if it's just like, even the way the crash dynamic ended up kind of devolving into just, well, this Democrat connected. It's like, well, now that went from trans pilot to, well, she worked for Biden, it just gets crazy. Right. And so the problem is that is a hollow situation, in my opinion anyway. So as long as they're going after, as you said, the Democrats, that we just ignore it. And so it's this kind of thing, that Zero Hedge shared says, oh, you got to be kidding me. And all it really is Chuck Schumer saying an elected shadow government. Now, aside from the word shadow government, which it's debatable, deep state, shadow government, we all have our different opinions on these things, but an unelected entity is conducting a hostile takeover of government. I flatly agree with that, except I also think that involves with Zionism and technocracy. But did you say you don't? Did you say no. Go ahead.
No, I'm in agreement with it.
Okay, I was going to say, if you don't, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. But so what's interesting is that, Alex Soros reposted that's what I was going to highlight, and that's what they're upset about. And then Catherine Austin-Fitts says that's the problem. The last government was lawless, so now it's cool for this government to be lawless. America's social media promoting the idea that lawlessness is cool. I'm talking about rampant lawlessness, since George Galloway made a big point about that. Fashionable. Abrogating contracts is cool. Genocide is cool. AI bots teaching that killing people and taking over their land is the latest style, and real men don't bother with law. I love that she framed this just right. And so all it ends up being is, well, look, Soros and Schumer and that's the thing. And so we know we're on the right side no matter what we're doing. And it's just so constant. And we're being led down that path. And, so give your thoughts on that. And then let's overlap this with the obvious, that is how all of them support the Israeli dynamic, which undermines the entire point, I would argue.
Of course. Yeah. It's a choose your own adventure book. If you'd had Kamala and she became the president, then you'd have more DEI, you'd have more wokeism, you'd have tranny story time mandatory, it'd be more of that, the gender component, which is disgusting and gross. Horrible. So Trump gets in, that whole segment goes away. Fantastic. But let's be very careful with what Trump represents. Do you want tranny story time, or do you want technocracy? Because that's even more diabolical when they start to bring in, you look at the people surrounding him, the Silicon Valley guys, Joe Lonsdale and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and this group out there that has the technological capacity to build the digital prison around you. And in fact, all they really need is the enthusiastic support of enough of a base to push it, and we'll be begging for our own enslavement, unfortunately. So I'm glad. Take the victories where you can, right? I'm glad that the wokeism stuff is going away. It should have never been there. The ESG, DEI side of things is nonsensical. It was against any sort of logic. These guys are all running Fortune 500 companies. That this goes against anything they learned in B school, because you're prioritizing the wrong things at the expense of the importance. So for that to go away, great. And I'll take that as a victory, but I am not delusional. I fully recognize that we could be getting rid of one problem and enabling a second one, which is this concept of, the push for CBDCs or the stablecoin component of that, the ideas of, we're going to get all of these unwanteds out of our country. We're going to throw them all out. And to make sure that we're going to do that, we're building not just a wall, but a digital wall to keep them out. And it's just going to be for the, for the illegals. At first, that'll be the sales pitch, right? We're just going to scan their eyeballs and make sure that we've got them in the database. And then eventually it'll be, well, it works so well. Why don't we just make it so that every time you fly in and out of an American airport, you got to do that as well, for your safety, of course. And
Right.
we can't let the illegals get on airplanes now, right? So we have to do that, because they're going to. So you can understand how they can walk you into this in a way that will be done with the support of the public, which is gross. But if you're not understanding the bigger picture, if you're not able to see a couple steps ahead, you may be cheerleading your own enslavement.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would also just add, though, that I hope people can stand back and at least ask the question, is it not possible that it wasn't sort of a evolution, or that this was a win and now this is something separate happening, even though we can all acknowledge that distancing, which technically is not even completely gone, even in this country, by the way, but overall being pushed aside is a good thing. It asks the question whether it's possible that it could have been designed that way in order to bring something so outlandishly stupid and so obviously inconsistent. Like I was pointing out, the WPATH, leading hospital in the world on this conversation, months into this was going, they're being rash with treatment for kids. I mean, I was showing that right in the beginning, and it just went on forward. And so that it doesn't make sense. And so you wonder why would that keep going? And now I would argue it's at least possible that it's because now we're going to kick that aside and we get that feeling of winning, and only it's a step and a means to an end, right? Because I think you've talked about too, the idea of the transgender overlap with transhumanism conversation.
For sure.
Which is not an opinion. I mean, you can look at literature going back a while where there was a clear overlap to that. I just think that's worth asking, And so, overall, take a win where you can, but don't let that blind you to where, using the win, not just a next step, but them using the win to roll in the next problem. I think that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I think the facts back that up,
You have to ask the question, were we allowed to win?
Exactly. And that doesn't,
it's set up for a much bigger agenda that's going on, that you whipsaw out of this into something more authoritarian. And so fine, we got rid of the transgender, but we've moved into transhumanism. Do you know the etymology of the transhumanism name? It's it's a rebranding of eugenics.
Right.
That's what it is. And once you understand that, it's not, a guy lost his arm in a farming accident and we've got a bionic arm for him. That's the sales pitch, of course. Mm-hmm. But the transhumanism component is blending man with machine into something else, into something that is transhuman. Well, is it transhuman enough? When you add enough mRNA technology or enough Neuralink chips to your brain, or enough of this stuff, at what point do you legally become no longer human? Right. And if you're legally no longer human, does the Constitution apply to you? Do laws apply to you? Are you now less than? Are you a slave species now because you're not technically human like everybody else? I mean, it's a dark road, of course, and nobody wants to really dwell on it, but I think it's worth understanding what the longer term play is. And of course, we've been conditioned to make short-term decisions at the expense of long-term decisions based on fear, based on the government scaring the hell out of us. And we say, oh, stop, daddy, go, whatever, just make it go away, make it stop right now in this moment. And in exchange, well, it's going to cost you some rights, and it's going to cost you more money, and it's going to cost you things that you have to give away in order to ensure your safety. And of course, that is by design, and that freaks me out, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of sounds similar to the way the U.S. government and others use their sanction dynamic, right? Where you sanction the civilian population, which is always what it's about. And so they suffer to such a great extent to where they're like, look, we know you're doing it, but we don't even care. Just make it stop and we'll let you take over. That's what it kind of comes down to.
Yep.
And here's a clip just showing you the overlap, which I'm sure everybody's aware of, but the clip in general is the one-stop kind of like every box check for the Great Reset and World Economic Forum dynamic, but just the transhumanism part from Elon Musk.
An effort for man to merge with machine in a healthy way.
Yes.
To beat machines, you basically have to merge with machines.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah, and I just think that's important to hear, this is, and that's not silent. It's funny how he checks a lot of those boxes like very bombastically, and yet people kind of like give him a pass on he's like all about the electronic vehicles. And it's just so funny how people would tear apart another Republican for kind of similar conversations.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we ask these, and even last point on it, do you think that whether, even just a genuine win, somebody genuinely does it, that's all they wanted to do, and they accomplished it, could still end up then being used by somebody else to roll in something bad. It's like this, we always have to ask this question. That's question everything, right? That's what we're always talking about.
Yeah, well, we don't have the CBDCs Yay, it's a win. We've got stable
Right.
coins, and stable coins, it's stable. It's in their name. It says stable, right? It's all stable. You don't have to worry about them. It's like, well, are they programmable? Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, but why would we? They're stable. Why would we program them to do anything? It's like, so again, there's all these guys are. We'll say what we will about the deep state or the octopus or whatever. They know how we think. They understand how to manipulate public opinion. They understand how to get people, whether it's this is coming from Tavistock or, a long history of psychologically profiling people and understanding how public relations works and propaganda and all of this. And we're really at a severe disadvantage as the average person when it comes to understanding that the government knows you better than yourself and they know how you'll respond. And so in order to get you to take something like transhumanism seriously, they've got to have a pitch man who's way better. I mean, you can't sell the concept of global communism by showing drab Soviet style buildings and bread lines, right? It's got to be like a glossy timeshare sales pitch, like, oh, it's going to be fantastic, and you're not even going to need to work. I mean, AOC said even if you don't want to work, she put it in her Green New Deal. You'll have everything will be provided for you. Isn't this great? And it's like, well, yeah, that sounds great, but what is it really going to be? And I think that that once you understand that the government is very, very astute when it comes to manipulating the way you perceive things, we have to be very careful about these guys that are thrust upon us as saviors, like Elon Musk. You have to ask questions about what he's real. I mean, if he's just about making money, that's one thing, but it's never about that. Once you can buy anything that has a price tag on it, you start looking for things that aren't available for sale, like the education system, if you're a Rockefeller or Carnegie or something like that. Or the pharmaceutical industry, if the Rockefellers as well coming through there and say, well, let's create these new industries. So a guy like Elon Musk, who has in concept all the money he'll ever need, you have to ask questions about what is he really trying to do. It appears to me that he's trying to buy things that don't have price tags on them.
I agree. And to your point about how well they know us, I would argue, just like you ended with, that's because they run our social media platforms and spy on us with their surveillance. And, it's the AI infrastructure and all the people that I argue are presenting themselves as the saviors are the ones that are building this around you. That's what I can't stop seeing. But I hope I'm wrong with that. But this is what you agree? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I hope I'm wrong too. I mean, I want to be optimistic. I don't want to be, the new black-pilled. Ryan, we can't be black-pilled now. That's the new derogatory term. That's the new term to get you to stop listening to people who are being honest about things.
Right.
If it sounds negative, it's like, oh, you're black. Whitney obviously is taking the brunt of this, but you're black-pilled and you're a doomer and you're this and that. Look, if I'm honestly and accurately extrapolating out what I see currently, where it's going, and I talk about it and it has a negative tone to it, it doesn't make me black-pilled. It makes me honest and realistic, and maybe by talking about it now, we're more aware of it and makes it more difficult for it to happen in the future. Maybe it's the actual white pill of all. Like, let's have the conversation now before it's too late, right?
Exactly. Well, that's what's so frustrating. I mean, all I see in that is just yet another example of the co-opting of terms, right? Far back as you want to look, when like regime change used to be a conspiracy theory, and now it's like regime change for freedom. It's just crazy how these things evolve. I would argue that's, I mean, this. I mean, black-pilled is about somebody that's going, we're doomed, we're screwed, I'm not going to do anything, right? That's what that means. When we're coming out and going, I see a big problem building here. I hope that's not what he's doing. I'm praying for the best. Here's alternatives. It's like, how will you ever deem that black-pilled? I mean, we know why, because that's a problematic thing that we're highlighting for people that don't want that to be seen. That's how I would see that. But or purity test, this was pre-election. It was just like, just let us pick between lesser of evils. Don't stop raining on our parade is what we got, But so this is where I think the obvious part is to overlap, and we'll end. I want to make sure we get into, especially the fact that you took over Active's post. I'm really happy about that. But and IMA and some different things we'll talk about. I was going to start with it, but you know how I fly by the seat of my pants. But let's talk about the overlap of this conversation we were just having with the Israel dynamic, because I don't know how anybody can engage with this honestly and not stand back and go, okay, well, at the very least, they're either blackmailed, compromised, or dishonest in regard to this point in the conversation. That to me just seems like it's blatantly clear. I don't know if you've seen the updates. I think we were talking about it earlier. The ultimate point that now Trump is, he was sitting next to Netanyahu, next to a fire, as Netanyahu smiles with this disgusting grin as he literally outlines how Gaza's hell on earth, completely destroyed, and how they're going to ethnically cleanse the entire area. So should I play it real quick, or have you already seen it?
Yeah, play it. Yeah,
okay.
It's worth watching again.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, and they're willing to supply it. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, and it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die, because Gaza is a guarantee that they're going to end up dying. The same thing's going to happen again. It's happened over and over again, and it's going to happen again as sure as you're standing there, Peter. So I hope that we could do something where they wouldn't want to go back. Who would want to go back? They've experienced nothing but death and destruction. Who would want to?
Hi. Give me your thoughts on that, brother.
Because the guy next to you is doing the death and destruction. Oh my God. Why is this impossible for him to see?
You think he can't see it? Really?
I think he sees it. I think he sees it. I think look, I don't even know that you need to blackmail Trump. I think he's ideologically aligned with this. I don't think so that the conversation is you better do this or else. I think he's looking at this as a real estate play. He's looking at the offshore oil and gas fields. He's looking at building a new pipe, a new canal through there, the Greater Israel Project. He's looking at this like a developer, and he's seeing massive opportunities, forgetting the human cost. The fact that you heard that one reporter scream out, it's their home. Why do they have to leave? Yeah, why do they have to leave? Because this guy's magic book said something about, it's preposterous and gross and a stain on humanity, an embarrassment to the United States, but it's not surprising either. I knew that when Trump got in there, every administration is completely compromised. Let's be honest here, by Israel, and we know that they have minders that show up in Congress as soon as they get elected, and we understand this. This is nothing new. But Trump is such an enthusiastic supporter, and they have bent over backwards, to make him, his first time around to Trump Heights, and they're talking to him about all of these opportunities there. His son-in-law Jared Kushner is a diabolical figure who needs to be, taken down to the police station and interrogated for his role in crimes against humanity as well. I think all of these people are dark entities. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the most disgusting human beings I've ever seen in my entire life. An embarrassment for the Jewish people who see him, who have him as a leader. And again, to separate the Jewish people from the Jewish government, from the Israeli government, in the same way that I would hope they would look at us and say, we understand that not all Americans are the American government, and they don't want the same things there. I think that there are people that see this for what it is, as a genocide, and given that that's what's happening right now, I'm not going to be silent about it. It's obvious to even those who don't have the eye to see it, what's going on. It's been, maybe the intricacies of like what really happened in October of 2023. Was this allowed to happen? Who is Hamas? Who are they financed by? They're, who brought them into existence? What is, you've got Bibi saying, we need Hamas. You got to finance Hamas. I mean, we have to have that. Funny, a lot of people don't ever see that part of it. So controlled opposition is a real thing. This isn't accidental. What happened on October 7th wasn't some catastrophic lapse in security. It was 9/11 all over again. It
Even
was
the same excuse.
The same excuse. Mistakes were made. We were asleep at the wheel. Those diabolical Arabs, those 19 Arab hijackers with box cutters, they caught us off guard. We flew planes around in circles trying to find them. We just couldn't figure it out until it was too late. Yeah. I've heard that. I know what really happened with 9/11. And when you see October 7th, it's the same thing all over again, just chapter 2. And for those with the eyes to see it, it's very obvious. For those who can't understand or refuse to understand the game, they're living in a parallel universe as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to look at this and say they had it coming to them, I can't understand that line of thinking.
I have to be of the mind, my sanity, that there's just no way that that's the majority of people, even remotely on the planet, that would look at what's happening, even if they disagree politically, and go, that's what they get. Like, that is a Zionist overwhelming agenda through our propaganda networks, which clearly are powerful. I think on the reverse of it, I think the vast majority of individual people in the world are sick about what's happening.
I can't stop seeing it. I think so too. The problem is, of course, and we all know this, is that the media amplifies whatever opinion they want to be perceived as being the overriding feeling of the nation or of the region. But when you talk to actual people who, nobody wants this. Nobody is pushing for this, except for outside of a small, very bloodthirsty Zionist regime that has bigger aspirations than just coexisting with their neighbors. They have been very vocal. It's not our opinion of it. It's they talk about it. It's not me. I don't have to speculate. I don't have to go into some meditative trance and write quatrains about what I think is going on. They write books about it. They talk openly about it. This is the plan. They have a Greater Israel patch on their uniform. Right. It's only hidden to the extent that people choose to not look for it. But once you open your eyes, you can see what's going on. It's a stain on humanity, frankly. And it's disgusting.
And I would add, though, and this is an uncomfortable topic even on top of this, but I would add that it's important to highlight that it seems pretty easily identifiable through polls and other public conversations that a majority of Israelis support the genocide. I think that's important to highlight. Now,
it's sad. I think the majority, not everybody, of course. We'll be clear to make sure that not everybody is in support of this. But
really quickly, let me clarify the statement. That's really. Then I'll let you. What I was going to say is that that's clearly improvable. But I would argue that what's important to consider is that what we see in the United States is the similar dynamic of people that support war, for example, because we've been so aggressively propagandized our entire lives. That I'm not trying to give everybody a pass because that's still horrifying, but it's important to think about that part of it. And there's also a pretty large grouping of people in Israel that don't support this, Orthodox Jewish communities and so on. So please go ahead. I just want to make sure
they've been vocal about that, and we of course need to make sure that we differentiate between the Zionist regime and, let's just say, Jews in general. A lot of them are opposed to this and see no benefit to it, and they want to live their lives and they don't have an interest in dominating their neighbors. But of course, unfortunately, those in a position of power do, and they make it happen. And then through their control of the media messaging and their control of the politicians, they facilitate this. And next thing you know, I mean, America is supporting it. Now, I have a problem with that. If I go out and travel internationally as an American, I hope that people don't make the assumption that because I'm an American in their country that I somehow sign off on all the crazy things that our government is doing. I mean, obviously I'm hosting and emceeing the largest anarchist conference in the world. So probably people don't think that unless they don't know me, but still, I wouldn't want people to make any assumptions that I'm in favor of this simply because I happen to have been born in America.
Exactly. Same point should be applied for Israelis or Jewish people in general, or any other conversation we're having. That's always the way to look at that. Let me play this real quick based on what we just saw, just because somebody clipped out just him And I mean, I saw this while I was watching it too, but just seeing it cut out on its own, I mean, it's so transparent. Trump is talking about the suffering of people in Gaza. There's no way around that. And this is what Netanyahu is doing the entire time.
They want to return. The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places
that guy, man.
on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build,
it's like the cat that got the canary. You know what I mean? Like, look at this guy's face. Look at that. He's so. I mean, I don't. And I'm sure somebody would see it and think differently. That's a personal opinion, but my God.
It reminds me of Whitney talking about Wexner saying that he has a demon inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
He looked demonic there.
He does.
To take glee in this. There's a manifestation of evil in that guy's head. And then the putting the chair, Trump pulls out his chair, put his chair back. Boy, I mean, are you guys on a date? I mean, is this Valentine's Day? What's going on here? It's gross and transparent for people that are watching this. I think that Trump had a lot of enthusiasm and I think a lot of people in the general public were supporting some of the changes that he was making quickly. And you would see, and then as soon as this happened yesterday, it's like, hey, I was, like people were saying, I was on board with a lot of the stuff he's been doing, but boy, this is really disgusting. And I can't support this at all. It's a mask off moment, I think, for a lot of people to see that, to hear him talk, to hear Trump talking about what he wants to do to them and justifying it as if it's somehow like, well, we'll just, it's almost like, oh, your house in Pacific Palisades burned down. Like, well, we'll relocate you to Westlake Village. No problem. Like, no sweat. Like, it's like, no. The point is, I want to be where I was. Mm-hmm. I want to be where my home was. I want to be there because it's always been my home. I want to be there I want to be with my people. You have no right to do this. This wasn't some natural disaster that just happened to hit the Palestinian people. This was done intentionally by design. And then, in the aftermath, oh, this place is a total dump. It's rubble. Yeah, you guys did it. You made sure that it was that way. Of course, it's hard to want to go back there after you've destroyed it. That was the point. You rightly called this out from the beginning, and people called you, I don't know. They probably thought that you had an axe to grind against Israel for rightly saying this is how it's going to play out. This is what they want. They're going to destroy it, and they'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. And when you're Israel, you do neither, actually.
Yeah. And on Trump and the way he engaged with it, I mean, like that's why I said right when we first looked at it, it's certainly possible. And the only reason I say this, it's always anything's possible, but the reason I even say it is because I think that the way he responds, it's possible that maybe he just somehow doesn't understand that, like the history part of it, right? How that's possible, I have no idea. But the way he does, I mean, or he's just that Netanyahu was like, say exactly this, because this makes, because think about what he's saying, that these people are in hell, or like it's always been bad. It's like, how do you not understand the context, even slightly, of what you're saying right there, And I think it's because you get into this bigger part of the conversation that, as Glenn points out, and it's funny to me how Glenn Greenwald saying this, who, by the way, I believe he's Jewish, isn't he? Not like that's even the most relevant. He is, I believe. He's
Jewish, and he was a Democrat.
Right. And saying, I'll just read it, Gaza's now rubble because of the sociopath sitting next to Trump, grinning, knowing he owns the U.S. Think about saying that a decade ago, a few years ago. The point is, you would have been immediately cast out of society, and this is the reality. This is not about Jewish people. This is about a government influencing, if not occupying and controlling, another government. And I mean, I got called a white supremacist for simply pointing that occupation point out, right, like kind of right after the COVID-19 idea. I just think that's wild to think that, Glenn, are you of the mind that this is public knowledge at this point for most people?
I guess it depends on their level of understanding or how busy they are in their daily lives. I think a certain segment of the population gets their news in sound bites and headlines, and they don't dig too deep. And or maybe they feel like, well, what do I need to? I need to get my kids to soccer practice. I don't need to know about this. What am I going to do? But I think that anybody who's actually paying attention, I think, they see this. You can see it on, and I know social media is not the best mirror, but you can see that, like you mentioned, there are topics that are now allowable to be discussed that wouldn't have been a decade ago. And so that's not because everybody woke up and became anti-Semitic all of a sudden. It's because the behavior of the people in that country has been disgusting, and people are rightly calling them out. And it's kind of like back in the COVID era where everyone had to wear masks, and you'd go into the grocery store without your mask on. You'd just walk in like there wasn't a care in the world. And somebody else in the produce section with their mask on would see you, and they'd go, oh yeah, and they'd pull theirs down a little bit. And they'd be emboldened to sort of say, yeah, you're right, this is kind of crazy. Why am I doing this? And I think that there's been enough people that have been blowing the whistle and sounding the alarm on the many crimes of Israel that at some point people go, yeah, you know what, you're right. This is a huge problem. I mean, they feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it. Now, we take the most heat about any of these topics, be it COVID, vaccines, Israel, whatever, because we're speaking about it in the moment when it matters the most. Whereas the mainstream alternative media parachutes in 3 years later, and then they want to have the discussion about vaccines. It's like, I'm glad you're talking about it, but where were you in 2021 when we needed you, right? When it really mattered, when people were being throttled and shadow banned and thrown off of social media for having opinions that were correct, but were just early. So when you're early, you look crazy, but that's okay with me. I don't really mind.
Right. Well, what's funny is what you outlined right there is exactly what I'm now seeing on like a presidential or just like a government level, like where the idea being, you know, like it's hard. Like when you say that, I'm like, maybe I don't think I am glad they're talking about it. Right. It's like, okay, if we know they're only beginning to talk about it insofar that they get you into another manipulation, which is what ultimately seems to be, is like, is that positive that they see it if it's only trapping them in some of another ideological game? You know, it's hard that it's a debate, because it is good that it's being talked about, but like my point is, everywhere I look today, I'm seeing that kind of setup for failure, you know? And so as always, just be on guard to that. But what's incredible, by the way, is in extension of this one meeting they had, I don't know if you've been following the pager thing, or like the Batar USA group, the Zionist organization that's literally threatening American students with pagers. They're going around, they're doxing people. They're trying to get people who are wearing kippahs deported, calling ICE, like using what Trump just did, like trying to get Americans deported. Netanyahu gives Trump a golden pager in reference to Mossad op on Hezbollah. You know, one of the most obvious terrorist acts I've ever seen in my life. He gives him a golden pager. Let's not forget, this guy is literally he's supposed to be arrested on site because he's a criminal according to the ICC. Yeah. But you know, anyway, I just wanted your thoughts on that. I think that's a threat, or well, how do you read that?
Well, Menachem Begin was stressed that he was the godfather of international terrorism. He proudly corrected somebody when they tried to say that he was, you know, just sort of involved. No. I invented this. So it's a terrorist state. It's a terrorist ideology. I'm not surprised. It's gross and disgusting on its face, of course. But am I surprised? No. A golden pager. I'm sure Trump will put it on his mantle. You know what I mean?
But I guess what I'm getting at, though, is that, you know, look, there's a lot of conversation about, and we kind of just touched on it, about whether, you know, I even though I do agree Trump is like ideologically in support of this, that he gets a lot of, like, some of the people in Israel, even in the Knesset, believe he's a prophet. They've said that publicly. It's alarming. And so I think he gets a lot from that. But I still just can't wrap my mind around how belligerent this is, and knowing there's half his base that doesn't support it. And so I just wonder whether there is more, like, is this a subtle thing? Like, keep in line. You know what I mean? Like, it's just personal opinion, but it's worth floating out there. I thought that was interesting.
It may be, but again, I don't know how much they need to keep him in line. I think he's in line of his own accord. And I think that he sees opportunities here. That being said, if he were to ever get out of line, I'm sure they could manage to put him back. But the idea that it's just a subtle reminder. You know, Pagers today, it's something else tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that they were bragging about that and not distancing themselves from that and saying, well, we didn't do that. I mean, we didn't do the pager thing. I mean, the Mossad came out and said, yeah, we did it. We've been planning it for a long time. Like, keep that in mind. Actually, when I see something like that, I'll tell you where my mind goes to. When they're bragging and taking responsibility and sort of playing up this, that I actually see that as a sense of weakness.
I do too. I absolutely do.
That maybe they're projecting out how diabolical and infiltrated everybody, you know, how they are so far ahead of everybody else, and it might be a bluff. I mean, it obviously wasn't a bluff that the pager situation happened, but their strength might be a bit of a facade.
It's a good point. I mean, even if they are actually strong or actually that good at what they're talking about, I think this is kind of a general psychological thing that the person that has to pound their chest and say, I'm big and tough is usually insecure at the very least, possibly not that tough at all. Like that's a good, and I think I got the same sense that a lot of this is them constantly going like, or even the propaganda, instead of just going, we didn't do it and it's a lie, they have to make it some ridiculous over the top lie that makes you go, well, that's obviously not true. Like, why would they go that far? I think it's insecurity. I'll include a show we did about that main point, which overlaps with, in light of the pager attack, how much Israel has infiltrated American tech. And let's not forget, it was mostly women and children that were killed and injured by that attack, which is wild to me. But let's and I just want to include her tweet about Build Back Better in Gaza, which she called, by the way. Efrat Fangenson was like, this is about Build Back Better. No, I don't see Republicans talking about land grabs and Great Reset with this conversation. But I also want to play this clip about the atrocity propaganda, where they mention the idea of burned babies alive. This is where I'm getting like, does Trump really not know that this has been shown to be false? I mean, Biden got exposed and looked very stupid for making these claims, and now here's Trump doing it too. How do you read this as anything other than Israel showing the control they have over our government? It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
Maybe
so.
It's this one here.
The Israelis have stood strong and united in the face of an enemy that has kidnapped, tortured, raped, and slaughtered innocent men, women, children, and even little babies.
On that infamous day, Hamas monsters savagely murdered 1,200 innocent people, including more than 40 Americans. They beheaded men, they raped women, they burnt babies alive, and they took 251 people hostage.
So for those that don't know, almost every single thing they said has been literally proven to be false by Haaretz, by Israeli media, by even U.S. media. Even the number 1,200 is technically not accurate, taking the full amount. And then we can realize that almost half, if not a lot more, based on a lot of reports, were killed by Israel themselves. Right. These are public reports. Go ahead. What are your comments?
Oh, I mean, I would love for somebody in the audience to raise their hand and ask the question, could you explain the Hannibal Directive, please?
Right.
Please,
or name the babies that were, you mean, the point is that these are false. It's the burn, the beheadings, even the rape conversation. I mean, as you cover as well. And I always say, damn them for making us have to stand up and go, I don't believe that's true. Like, I look at the facts, it's a horrifying thing to have to do.
There's no line in the sand they won't cross, though, either. I mean, they want to make you be on the defensive, and you have to stand up and say, I believe that your story is a lie. I believe that you would and are currently standing in front of that microphone and lying about babies being burned alive, because that's that's the type of person that you are. You would lie about something as serious as that. Now, to be clear, if there were babies being burned alive, that would be horrible, of course. But they know that would be horrible, and that's the reason why it's the story. The story is always horrible, and then later it's there's corrections are made. I always find it interesting that Haaretz is one to fact check this too. I mean, my assumption would be, I mean, I know how controlled the American media is. I mean, I would assume that the Israeli media would be just as controlled. So when they come out and go, look, we got problems with the Palestinians, but they didn't do any of this stuff. Like these are lies. That to me is, I think that's progress. Unfortunately, it's not going to help the Palestinians now, but the tone around the world has definitely changed. Of course, in the UN and then the ICC, you see who really runs it. All it takes is for the US and Israel to vote against something, and then it doesn't wind up happening. But the rest of the world appears to be well aware of what's happening. And of course, in the Middle East, they've been dealing with this group for a long, long time. They know exactly what they're capable of. They know that there's no line in the sand that the Israelis won't cross and then cross again. And I think that the world appears to be waking up. My fear is that it might be too little too late.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue, as always, never a reason to stop. Right. But I think people like us, even if we knew we were never going to succeed, it's in us to fight anyway. I think that's who we are. But I agree. And it's just, I think that's why this is being so rapidly done. I would say the fact that this is being so rushed, like we even felt during COVID-19, gives me the feeling that there is still a possibility for us to make something different happen. But I would agree, it's hard to not see that with how belligerent this all is, and especially with the point of where, which I'm sure you also saw, where now Trump is literally saying that we're going to take over Gaza, like occupy Gaza. This is, he used to at least give you like a week, a month in between the evolution of how ridiculous these things shift. But it's like day to day to day. It's like the thing you just said would never happen is now rationalized on day 3. It's ludicrous to me. But any thoughts on this, or just in general, it's the same kind of point? This is a step further. It's
a tactic too. Like it's the art of the deal. You'll go so far over. We'll say we'll take, the U.S. will take over Gaza, and then the general public's response is, that sounds crazy and insane. Okay, fine. We won't do that. We'll only finance the rebuilding.
You think that's a good point? So you don't think it'll actually materialize to U.S. government on the ground?
Anything's
already happening, by the way, but
anything's possible with regard to this, with Trump administration and the influence of Israel. I would say that normally I would say probably not, but unfortunately with regard to Israel, I think there might, I think anything's possible because everybody appears to be controlled.
Yeah. But it's an excellent point. We should always consider this, because that's almost always how it goes, right? Where you get the problem, reaction, solution style, where it's like the overreaction. We go, no, not that crazy thing. And they go, okay, don't worry. We've got the thing we've always wanted. And they go, ooh, thank God. It's like the thing that they wanted from the beginning. And so actually, when you say that, it could really realistically be, oh, okay, fine. We heard you. We listened to you. We're your government. We won't do it, but we'll just finance Israel taking over Gaza, which has always been the point from the beginning anyway. But something tells me, like you were kind of hinting at, though, that there is something different happening now, and that this is not just about the extension, or rather, Israel taking what it wants. It's about the continuation of this. This is the globalist New World Order dynamic, technocracy. I think that's all of this. And now they're, talking about North American Union, Greenland, Mexico, all the rest. Israel is occupying Syria, Lebanon, and they're expanding, as you just said, the greater reset, or greater Israel. It's all very clear that this is happening, and so to me, that's what that seems to highlight, that they're moving into this point.
We're moving into the 7th country in 5 years.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Iran and Marco Rubio. It's right there.
We're crossing all these off the list, and we knew this too when he was floating Rubio as a Secretary of State. We went, oh God, this is going to be like,
which the base said was a troll. You're being looked at. That'll never happen. And then now they all cheer for it.
Yeah. This is going to be a blank check for Israel. They're going to be able to do whatever they want to do. Yeah. This is part of. There's a lot going on right now, and I fear a much larger escalation too. Of course, because they've got there's it's like, they're not going to stop with this, right? Well, we've got rid of the Palestinians. Who's next? Let's expand out. When do we fight Iran? When does Israel convince the United States that it's in their best interest to go to war with Iran, who's done, by all accounts, nothing to us? He's got 4 years.
Yeah,
I fear that.
I think it's going to happen way faster than that. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. But one more point on this. Let's talk about what I see, the future of independent media, which I see is very positive right now, quite frankly, despite all the craziness going on. Interesting, you're getting a lot of this kind of Q side of the conversation, where Trump just opened the door to parking U.S. military in Israel's front lawn during our long-term op to defang Israel, because that's the whole save them for last Q idea, and made them thank him for doing it on live TV by using their own mask to box them in. Mossad just got freedom range motion crippled. And, basic idea being that this is the U.S. playing into the idea we're helping you, but really there to ultimately stop Israel for once and all, after letting them commit a genocide for a year and 2 months, but that's sort of like letting them take the shot that kills them for the interest of whatever play that means. I can't take any of this kind of stuff seriously. But what I overlap it with is I very much think that Q and all that is just a CIA, whatever intelligence dynamic, is that you have Trump coming out, like you might have seen, which, by the way, you want to search for this on Twitter, it won't show up, which I find very telling. The CIA must get involved now before it's too late, Trump said on January 2nd of this year. And you have Nick Sorter saying, breaking, the CIA just offered the entire workforce to quit in exchange for 8 months of pay. Wow. Vision for the Blind says the CIA allegedly offering its entire workforce the option to quit for 8 months pay sounds like a CIA psyop in itself. You really buying it? And so I think it's all interconnected, and I just wonder how easy it might be for them to just roll this into the next move by holding on to what they hope is going to happen. What do you think?
The Q part is interesting too, because I agree. It's just some intelligence agency doing this, but like any good propaganda, as we mentioned earlier, you got to have some truth in there. So is it plausible that the United States could double cross somebody? Oh,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's our specialty. That's what they've been doing for a long, long time. So this idea like, oh, the United States is secretly going to double cross Israel when the timing is right, once they're there. Like, I mean, maybe, but I'm not going to hold my breath on anything like that. It just sounds a little bit too much like, when it was trust the plan, the part of that I think was the most diabolical part was that you would get these people, all in a tizzy about what's going on and these very major problems. And then the strategy was, okay, what we need you guys to do is go stand in the corner and wait, right? Trust the plan. The cavalry's coming. The white hats are coming. It's all going to be explained. But for this point, we need you to go do nothing. When anybody is telling you to go do nothing, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
So I have, we took a look at this stuff over the last years, and we understand that there's intelligence agencies at work here. There's a lot going on. Man, you don't need to put on our tinfoil hats and speculate about Q when you've got the Army PSYOPs running commercials talking about, that we're here everywhere. We see what you do. We're there in the shadows and Ghosts in the Machine and all of this stuff. Like, the PSYOPs are commercials now. And at the end of them, to escape from mere generalizations, they put their web address at the end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't meant to be any sort of secret. So I think everybody needs to have their head on straight and to be very suspicious about being told that, about hearing these plans that line up perfectly with what you would want, because it's very rare that we get what we would want. The idea that the administration is going to double cross Israel at the end sounds like a fantasy, right? I mean, it sounds amazing, but the problem is it's almost like that's what you want to hear. They're telling you what you want to hear, and it's disarming in that regard, especially if the instructions are just wait here and do nothing. We'll tell you when you guys all get activated, and then we'll need you to help fight the good fight. But until that time, sit still and be quiet, man. I get very suspicious when I hear things like that.
Obviously, right? You should. I mean, I don't think anybody with the best intentions of actual change are going to tell you to just hope that they end up doing the right. Like, what if they fail? Shouldn't you at least be backup just in case? It's like, it's just a crazy idea to think we should do nothing. But I'm glad you point that out, because disarming is a great way to think about that. It really, truly is. Like, because you are, as always, like with COVID-19, the obvious point for me was that the group, constitutionalists, militia, right-leaning, were the biggest problem for what the people they knew would push back, and they got pacified because Trump was in that position. That's what I believe, and I think the same thing is happening right now. And so they're rolling out, not just like it looks like a win and there's a secret behind it, which is also happening, but they're rolling out the thing. Speaking at World Economic Forum, here's an mRNA shot, artificial intelligence infrastructure, and still people are like, no, here's why. And so we have a reason to be on guard. And so please do not trust the plan. Question everything, right? And this is why I think it's such an important point that whether it's objective, nonpartisan media, that's what it's all really about. And we all have our opinions and different leanings or different people we want to support, but of all people in this field, I mean, what you do is I love talking with you, because I always feel like we're willing to question everything and challenge ideas. And I'm really, really excited to point out, in case you guys didn't already know, that I already mentioned a second ago, is that he took over Activist Post and Natural Blaze, and he's also part of the Independent Media Alliance. And we just have a lot of, positive momentum, I argue, in this field, despite as crazy as it gets, So would you touch on that for me and what's going on around that and what your plans are? Because I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. And we got Corbett's head. He's the lead story right now. In the summer of 2024, I was approached by the previous owners of Activist Post And they said that they'd been doing this for 15 years. They were ready to do something else. I've been reading activist posts for at least the last 10 years, enthusiastic supporter of it. They republish articles from journalists around the world, and they approached me about it. They said, we want to make sure it goes to the right, the right person, the right ownership. It matters to them as it should. Yeah. And I was flattered. At first I said no. And then I thought about it and I said, well, yeah, I kind of have to do this. When the universe, puts something like this right in front of you, your job is to act upon it. Yeah. And so we worked on, we figured it out. And I said, yes, you know what, I'll do it. Let's make it happen. We rebuilt the site and launched it on January 1st. And activist, I bought it in an all Bitcoin transaction with those guys. Nice. And and Natural Blaze as well. And the point is that, with what I've been doing, I've been writing books, I've been doing podcasts, and this seemed like a fantastic evolution of my work when you write a book, it's like, it takes you 2 years. And sometimes by the time it comes out, some of the components of it are, it's not breaking news anymore. Podcasts, it's much better. It's much, I'm able to reach people twice a week with macroaggressions and union of the unwanted and things like that. But the news, the daily news, the news that never ends, it's always kind of going, boy, this is a real opportunity for us in the alternative media, the actual alternative media, the independent media, to for me to curate the content in a way that I think is ideologically aligned with my beliefs, which are anti-war first and foremost. I'm anti-empire. I wrote a book with Jeff Berwick called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. So we have, just taking that sort of mindset and in moving it forward in the alternative media space. And I hope that people will consider bookmarking it. When I rebuilt the site, the intention was, it'd been in existence for 15 years. They described it as heavy, and that's not great for mobile. So I said, well, when we do this, we've got to make a brand new site. It's got to be very secure, and it's got to fly on mobile, man. It's got to be good. But we didn't want to do an app. I didn't want to centralize control into the hands of an app store in Apple or Google. And so if you want it on your phone, just pull it up like in a browser and bookmark it and do it that way. Yeah. Or if it's on your tablet or PC. I hope that people will consider adding that to their media diet. I'm not saying get rid of what you're currently going to, just add this in addition to it. And then when you and Derek and Whitney reached out this summer, this had just happened in that video that you sent over, the 15-minute video kind of talking about this. Whitney made a comment in there, be nice to have a central place for articles, sort of like Zero Hedge. And I was like, oh, I can't really talk about it too much. But then I got you on the phone and I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Just so you know, I've got the centralized place for all these articles. And so if obviously the Independent Media Alliance is going to have a big role there. We're still building out parts of the site. It's going to have its own page down at the bottom of the homepage. There's a spot that says Independent Media Alliance, and then it says coming soon. We're gonna connect that. But I've been pulling articles, podcasts, and everything I could get from that group for the month or so that I've been in charge of Activist Post. And it's a fantastic place to catch everybody all in one spot, so you can get articles from Off Guardian and Unlimited Hangout. I put your Last American Vagabond up as podcast. You just saw Corbett's up there as the lead story right now. And it's a real treat. I'm honored. I take the job seriously. I'll make some mistakes along the way. No doubt about that. I think it's bound to happen, but my intentions are good. I want people to understand that these stories are important. They're worth talking about. You're not going to hear them on your nightly news. That news is compromised. You're going to have to be responsible for finding your own source of good information. And if Activist Post is in your rotation, you're going to get news that makes you feel like you're living in the future, like you have information that nobody's going to be talking about for months, if not years, right, until it's safe. And so I think that with my audience, the Venn diagram overlaps pretty considerably between the topics I talk about in macroaggressions or right in the books. I mean, it's so ideologically aligned with what Activist Post is doing right now. So I think that it's going to be a great source for people to check out, and eventually later this year we're going to do Activist Plus, which will be a premium component to that. There are some, let's be honest, there are some topics that it's tough to have conversations about in the general public because of the massive censorship. So some of that will have to go behind a paywall, and that will be brought, we'll do that towards the tail end of 2025. I want to make sure that we get the free component of Activist Post dialed in and working, and people are aware of that first. Make sure we do that right, and before we start to expand.
Well, outstanding, man. I'm excited for that. And I love the idea of the, kind of centralized location for different independent media, and like just being able to jump in there. And so, saves time at the end of the day.
And they get tagged with it too. I put a tag on there. So it'll be, if it's, say it's Kit Knightley, Off Guardian, Independent Media Alliance, right? So everyone's got their own, if you're part of that group, you'll get tagged as being part of that group. And so for people that are interested in finding it, they can just pull up that tag and just boom, it'll just drop down everything.
Outstanding. Yeah. And as for those that know, we've started as you mentioned, the Independent Media Alliance. Here's one of the recent ones I just pulled up just to grab real quick. Trump administration 2024, IMA discusses cabinet picks, policy proposals. And we've talked about a lot, digital IDs and so on. And I think it's the idea behind it is the same kind of thing, is that we recognize there's a lot of really alarming shifts happening right now. And this really kind of spearheaded, it started mostly because of the whole black pill, like right before the selection process. And we saw this building problem, and we reached out to the people that we thought were objective. And, plenty of people in this conversation have partisan discussions and points, but in my opinion, I still call it nonpartisan, because it's like we did today. We're all willing to challenge these things and look at it from an objective perspective. And I think that's a breath of fresh air for people. And I really do think it's having an impact. And so we're also going to be having the Odyssey's building something for this to be going on. I think that's supposed to come out this month. It's hopefully going to be happening soon. I'm really excited for that. But I'd like to find a way to intertwine all this. You know what I mean? Like with Activist Post and everything that you're doing as well. Because I really do think this is making a difference in this conversation. And despite all the aggressive pushback, which I think only showed us we were over the target, I've seen nothing but just overwhelming support for what this is.
And my philosophy has been, whether it's the books or podcasts or Activist Post as well, I reserve the right to change my mind about things if I'm presented with better, new information. And I have to be flexible enough about that. And like you and I are having the conversation, we're willing to look in unusual spots. Okay, are we walking into a trap here? Do I have a blind spot on this? I think that keeps us sharp in paying attention to that. And I don't want to get so dogmatic that I'm unwilling to move off of a position if my position was wrong. I need to have that flexibility for credibility reasons, just for my own sanity. Like, oh, maybe I got that part wrong. Okay, well, I got it wrong. I mean, let me not get it wrong the next time around, right? So I think that we're approaching this from a place of humility. We don't know it all. We know quite a bit. We've got a lot of the information, and I'm able to curate. If I might not have the sort of knowledge about a particular component, but somebody else does. Let's find their work. Let's make sure that we're showcasing that. And part of what we did is I reconfigured the categories, and, it's economy and empire and health and tech and podcasts and solutions and crypto, so we wanted to make sure that there's a little bit for everybody there. So that, especially the podcasts too, because I know that people don't always get their information the same way. Some people like to read books. Some people like to listen to books on as an audiobook. So why don't I make sure that the information is there in a variety of different formats? That's why we added the podcast component to it. And again, it's also extremely important, since we're getting labeled as black-pilled, that we offer solutions. And I think that the solution side, is necessary here. And for people that are trying to figure out okay, great. I understand that we've got big problems and these are real issues that we face. How do I maneuver myself outside of it? You'll see some articles there on homeschooling. You'll see some, there's a lot going on. So to complain without offering solutions, I don't think does anybody any good. So we're going to make sure that we we really take care of making sure that if people come to activist posts, then they'll say, oh, you know what, this is great. I get educated on all this stuff, and then there's a way for me to then do something about it.
Outstanding. I mean, I'm really excited for this, and I, as I said a second ago, I mean, as much as it's getting more intense, I guess, I genuinely think that we're seeing a really positive change. And the whole darker before the dawn analogy is accurate for a reason, and I think that every time we start to see positive change, people become aware. We've seen different points of it in the past. The dial is turned up, right? When we're more uncomfortable, we're more willing to look for support from the power structure, right? We want them to take care of problems, by and large, as like a populace. And so I think that's where we are right now. And I'm actually very positive. I feel very positive about where it's going with the genuine independent media and the people that are attuned to that. So I think as long as we're willing to stand back and, like you're saying, and just ask the question, is it possible that we're being fed a false picture of what the majority is, or what the real picture is? And I think more people than ever are at least willing to ask that question today. So feel positive.
After going through the COVID years and the Biden years, I think a lot of people have reevaluated the relationship that they have with their media, that they've gone, okay, I used to just come home and turn on the TV and get my news and whatever, but now these people are lying to me. I still want news. I want to know what's going on. I don't need you to tell me how to feel about this necessarily. Can you give me the news? And I think there's a huge opportunity for us out there to find these people that I would consider them to be media free agents, right? That they're looking for information somewhere and they maybe don't know where to go. So I put this to the readers, the current readers of Activist Post. You play a role in this. I need your help. I need you, if there's an article that you found that you like, I need you to share it with the people that you think might be interested in it, because we're obviously not going to get any love from the algorithms. They hate what we're doing, but there's a lot of people out there that are kind of drifting and they want to know what's happening. They just don't know exactly where to go. And in the old days, it might've been a video might've been suggested, or something might've, you would have been in that flow of the algorithm and people would find out about you. That was cut off a long time ago. It really hampered Activist Post back in 2016. They were part of that, that 200, the disinformation 200 list that was along with WikiLeaks and Zero Hedge and Free Thought Project and a bunch of others. And that crippled the advertising component of it too. So they'll try to undercut you financially if they can. Well, obviously we've seen it with tech censorship. They've been doing that, but as long as we are able to take this information and share it with people that are close to us, that's how we spread this information. That's how we win. That's how Activist Post continues to stay relevant and grow into the future. So for those of you out there that like what you see there, then please take the additional step of sharing it with people that you think might be of like minds.
Yeah. And I think that's what, winning is such an abstract thing in what we do. I did a show a while back about like redefining what we think winning means in this field, because it's very hard to see a real long-term, but that's what I think it comes down to. You reach one new person today. If you reach one new person to open their mind to a broader objective perspective, then you won, and I think that's what you just laid out there. So I'm really feeling really positive about that. I really did enjoy our conversation today, man. And I think that it's one of the things I love about what I seem to have the way our conversations go every time, but people that have these kind of conversations, it's not just giving different thoughts, but sort of like coming to a new, thought together with our different opinions. And so really appreciate that today, man. And anything else you want to leave on the way out, upcoming events or new books or anything coming out? Like that?
But in 2 weeks, I'll be in Acapulco, Mexico for Anarchapulco, the largest anarchist conference in the world. I'll be the MC again this year. It's fantastic. It's the best week of the year. You'll leave feeling inspired, maybe a little sad, because you're like, oh God, I got to go back to the real world. But you'll find that there's a lot of very smart people out there that aren't trying to fix the system. They recognize the system is broken. They're building outside of the system. They're doing things differently with parallel structures. And it's very inspiring. It's international in scope. It's every day is a different topic. So if you're able to get to Acapulco, I realize not everybody can. If you can't, you can live stream it. You'll be blown away. Last year, I got the opportunity to virtually interview David Icke to open the event. He was not able to fly there, but we had him on the big screen behind me, and I was able to interview him, take questions from the audience. That's happening again. We've got Gareth Ike coming down in real life. He'll be there. We've got the VIP dinner for him. It's just there's crypto going on. There's health and wellness components to it. Sovereign skills. If you're somebody that wants to get residency in another country or get a different passport, that's going on. And then there's these outstanding workshops that happen as well, in addition to kids camp. I'll be speaking at one of the days with the kids camp about publishing and all that. You've got Jay Noon down there. He'll be teaching kids how to weld. Last year he was there. He was teaching kids how to weld. I was like, how old are these kids? He's like, I don't know, like 11 or 12. Like, they're great. They love it. That's awesome. There's a lot going on. You'll find a bunch of homeschoolers, unschoolers down there. It's a very subversive group. I'll tell you, I say that with as much due respect as possible. It's a great place. If you're interested, go to anarchapulco.com. And if you find something you like, the discount code is macro. That'll get you there. I hope to see everybody there. And then at nights, we all wind up at Max Egan's bar,
Nice.
for live music. Everyone's playing. They bring their instruments down there. There's live music. You can have some beers. It's smoke a joint out on the balcony. It's great, man.
Outstanding, man. Well, I hope everybody joins. And again, man, really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to talking with you again. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Wolves hiding nearby, whispering, do or die around me. You say your last good night while I get
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Psywar.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
gripping at my skin, the walls of night closing.
But the use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new form.
My last goodbye.
These are the Psywar soldiers.